tactical menu video. This set of functions loosely deal with positioning on the battlefield and perception. I guess is the most generalized way of saying it's like a miscellaneous bunch of things that you can do. The first thing that you can do, we've already looked at in the sample encounter, and that's going up or down in the third dimension. So we'll go 3 this time, 3 cubes for Vani. We get the elevator sound effect there. And visually, we can see that he's in the air because he has the flying state. You see that right there, the blue background with the white wings. And we see that in the chat and in the stat sheet. Always be aware of the elevations, the altitudes of all tokens. Here's why. Say I want to attack Vani, and my players make this mistake more often than I care to point out. And say he goes, yeah, we're there. He's right beside me. I can attack him. Watch this. I'm gonna go at will. Uh-oh, it doesn't give me the attack macro with my 2-hit that I'm expecting. What does it say? Macro defined area, no targets found within range. Check relative altitudes, visible players' flags, and whether target AC is under 100, and all that good stuff. So that's the framework's way of showing, nope, with a range 1 power, you can't reach a guy that's 3 in the air. Now, what's interesting is if this guy takes a growth potion and he becomes huge, well, what happens then? Because he's bigger now, right? Will that work? Let's see. At will. Oh, look at that. He's big enough because he's under Vani now and he's 3 cubes tall. He can reach an altitude 3 token. So we're being given the 2-hit, the attack macro that we expect. We'll just cancel out of that. And of course, if he wants to go even higher, edge himself high, if he has a shift ability in the air, we can go altitude +1 to make it a little easier in your quick group. Disengage. Okay, this is very important. If you have dead tokens on the map, say they've been slain, disengage should be sent to that token automatically by send macro, by the damage macro. We'll do that. After the death macro, will do that. So you'll see the link for death in the chat. You can click that if you want, or you can run it from the tactical menu here, disengage. So watch what happens when we do. We'll say okay. And he disengages. So the invisible versus Vani invisible is ended for whatever reason that was on. And he doesn't have an altitude. Look at that. He's back down to altitude 0. So that transaction has been revoked on the token. So other macros that use disengage is obviously the main one is short rest, and extended rest calls short rest. So by virtue of that succession, it calls disengage as well. So that's how that works. So we'll go to tactical again and see initiative. We can roll initiative. And as I said, you may want to do this ahead of time if you want. Actually, I actually prefer to use validate token ownerships because that does everybody at once. It's very, very simple. Rolls for me, and I don't have to go to the tedious manual process for each monster. But there is an advantage for doing that, for running initiative manually. It's asking roll now, yes or no. We can actually say no if we want to, and it will put that in reserve for us. It puts the targeting immunity effect on him, And we have that observing state right there to indicate that visually. That way we know he's got an AC over 100 if you see in the fifth line of the stat sheet there. So he is not targetable. So he is lurking in the background. And when we do act now from common free no on round 2 or round 3 or whenever he enters the combat, that'll all be taken off. And you'll notice in his label on the second line there after his name, below the token, his roll is 26. So it will be introduced in that manner. So that's kind of convenient if you have monsters that won't be starting at round 1. So let's see what else. Okay, token is the next one. So this one is a little controversial. It will go out and ask you. Actually, you should have asked me right there, because it's outside combat. That's probably why it automatically went to itself, and it actually centers the token on. Oh, actually, sorry, it located Vani and it centered Vani on the map. See how it says target Vani, and puts a light source on him, yellow. So that's how that works. That might not be appropriate, by the way. Ask your DM before you run that. I never used this move melee return a boss, to be honest with you. You can if you want. It's a way of doing spring attack, if you remember that action from 3.5. So we have to set this up first before we can do that. And the way we do that is it's similar to what opportunity attack does, that macro, but it allows you to designate an adjacent square, because opportunity attack, what it'll do is it'll put you actually on the defending token itself. So watch this. We will do tactical. So it teleports us beside the guy, or wherever you want to go, however far away he can attack from, and gives us a melee basic, which hits. Do damage. And it puts us back to where we were. If you can find a use for that and you think that's useful, go for it. But personally, speaking from my own experience, we haven't needed that yet. Rangefinder is next. So this is pretty simple. Within squares, within 10 squares, let's say, show me where all the tokens are, the different ranges. And I'll go to the enemies and say Vani is 4 squares away. That way you don't have to use the measuring tool in map tool to see how far. You can just run this and you can judge whether somebody it was within range. So if Bony Guy Blue has a power that he can use for enemies within 5, we know that Vani's 4 squares away. Rather than here, you can see it's hard to count because there's no grid. And even if there was, if you don't want to count it out, then you can just use rangefinder. Again, I recommend, because that's a quick and dirty thing, maybe you want to use a quick button for that. You can do quick buttons for almost anything you want. Search area. I don't think this will work too well because I don't have tracks on the info token. But you can do an active or passive perception check on all the tokens within the area. It'll skip things like the boss and stuff, the system tokens, but usually a passive is good enough. And it goes through the info token and doesn't find anything. It doesn't display anything here. But that's just a quick way of looking at all the tokens in the area in case they have any perception tracks that you might be interested in. They'll be revealed. And by the way, that behind the scenes uses the line of sight targeting feature of the framework. So if something is behind a wall relative to the observer, then it's not going to show that information. Shift. You can shift one square. Like, let's say we're going southeast. There he goes. Now, this again is controversial. My players say, dude, we don't want to run a macro just to move one square. What's the point of that? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, one of them, the main reason that I like, is shift is a defined event within the trigger definition framework. The framework, I guess you could say, the feature. And you can run things like Boots of the Fencing Master. You can attach that macro for Boots of the Fence, the property, to this macro, this event. So every time you use shift, Boots of the Fencing Master will automatically run, and you will automatically get a 1 bonus to AC and reflex. So that's convenient. So you don't have to run the macro to get that. And it actually shows a record within the transcript, which I like as a DM. I want to know who shifted when. So that's another example. And you can do other things too. Let's see. Let's look at the options that we have with shift. Okay. You can shift to the A boss if you want to. You don't have to go one by one. If you have multiple squares, by default, it only goes 1 squares. But you can do a melee basic while you're going through your various shifts. It keeps asking you over and over again where you're shifting to next, or you can run a macro if you want to. And that's useful for things like the Flesh Golem's Rampage attack, for example. There he goes. That's considered a shift. And when he does that, you will not be on the opportunity attack targets list, because opportunity attack, right there, knows, like if Vani wants to take an opportunity attack against a shifting guy, he won't show up. This bony guy blue will not show up in the menu as a target for the opportunity attack, because it knows. It knows that shifting guys are not targets for opportunity attacks. If you want to take one anyway, say you have a feat that allows you to ignore that rule, then just go actions in combat and melee basic. And you're off to the races. So I think we can go to swap places next. So we will swap places with Vani, let's say. Okay, so see how they swapped, because Vani was right beside him. I don't know why it didn't ask for Bony Guy Red. Sometimes I guess that he's you can't swap with that guy that size. But these two swapped. Vani was there, and the skeleton was here. Now here's the thing. Sometimes small tokens, I think I mentioned this in a past video, don't go to the right square. Like this guy might end up here or something. If that happens, just move it to where he should be. I don't know why this happens. MapTool has a weird way of handling the coordinate system for small or smaller tokens. It does things differently. I've tried to compensate for it within the code. It doesn't seem to work every time. Here it did, so that's good. And last but not least, we have unflankable. So I lied in the past video. That is actually a runnable macro now. It wasn't for the longest time, so I forgot that. My apologies, mea culpa. So that's it for Tactical. Thanks for watching.